Hello, thank you for taking the time to watch this. My name is Nick Coover, and as my senior project product, I'm doing a documentary on the AR-15 assault rifle. So let's get started. Before tampering with any firearm, one should always make sure it's unloaded first. With an AR-15, you do this by releasing the magazine with this button and pulling back the charging arm, opening up the chamber to your view to make sure that there is nothing in it. Then you will release the charging arm. Do not ever ride it down. This could cause it to jam. After clearing the rifle of any ammunition, you remove the upper and lower receiver by releasing two pins. The first pin is right here beside the selector switch. You'll take your knuckle and very lightly tap it. Doesn't take much force. And then you'll pull it out like so and set it down somewhere where you won't lose it. This right here allows the rifle to pivot, and as you can see, I can now get to all the inner workings and such, but in order to fully separate the rifle for proper cleaning, you take the pivot pin out too. The pivot pin is this somewhat larger pin up here in the front, and it's taken out the same way as the rear pin by tapping on one side and pulling on the other. And as you can see, it's a good deal larger than the other one. After you get them apart, this will allow the weapon to separate. After separating the upper and lower receiver, take the lower receiver and pull the trigger. Now, what this is actually the hammer. This is what strikes the firing pin. So you want to make sure that it's forward so that you can get up inside of it to clean it. Next, you take the upper receiver, you pull the charging arm. You have to make sure that you push this part right here in, and you pull back. And this will allow the bolt to come out and the charging arm. Now that you have the bolt taken out all by itself, the first step is to remove the firing pin. The firing pin is what detonates the primer and overall makes the round go off. You will start by removing this small pin right here. Then you will cup your palm over this hole, your fingers over this hole, and when you pop the bolt enough, the pin will come out. And this right here is the firing pin for the AR assault rifle. After you've taken the firing pin out, you will take this pin right here and spin it until it is parallel with the rest of the bolt. Then using your fingernails, you'll pull it out and set it down. Now you'll pull this piece out. And there before you is the entire bolt assembly. You will now reassemble the upper receiver. First thing is you will take the upper receiver and you will slide the charging handle back in. Next, you will take the bolt, but before you put it in, you must make sure that this is pulled back so that it will not hold it. When it slides, it comes out to the side, but when you slide it back up, this will ensure that it fits. You put the star first and the piston down. You'll hear a click when they sink back together, and then you'll pop them all back in there together. Now that you have reassembled the upper receiver, it's time to reconnect the lower receiver and the upper receiver. This is done by sliding them together and placing the pivot pin into its keeper hole. This is not always done easily, and you might have to wiggle it a little bit. but once it finds its place, it'll go in very easily. And as you can see, I have it back in. Then you'll take the rear pin and put it through its hole. And that's it. I'm going to show you how it actually works. If you will observe right here, through these holes you will see a small shaft or rod. It's called the piston, the gas piston. So whenever the round comes out of the barrel, it hits a little tunnel that's in here, you can't see it, and it actually diverts some of the gas and pressure up and back onto this piston. This piston, which I don't know if you can see it or not, but it's protruding right here, is when it's assembled, hooked into this piece right here on the bolt. And right, so the piston is worked into the bolt right here, and so when this goes off, it drives the bolt back. You see how that works? I'll show you how the bolt actually controls the casing. So for those that don't know, this is a spent blank casing. Blanks are used for ceremonial purposes. It makes the bang and it looks just like the rifle went off, but there's no projectile in it. It's totally harmless. It won't shoot anything off into the sky that can come down later and hurt somebody. And this one is spent. If you look at the end of it, the primer is dented. So, whenever you close the bolt, the star bit here actually turns and goes up into the bolt. You can see it moving right here. So when it's closed, it's like this. And down below it in the magazine, here is your round waiting. So you pick it up and you grab that little handle in the back that I use, pull like a T-Rex, and I pull back on it, and this part comes and it turns, it comes back out, and then the whole bolt slides back, and then the spring pushes the round up in front of the bolt. And then when the bolt closes, it actually catches the round using the rim on the end of it and what's called an extractor. The extractor has this little claw, if you will, and it grabs this, and then this particular one has a piston right there. I don't know if you can see that little dot or not, but that's a little spring, and it's always keeping pressure on it, so it catches it, and then it slides back up, and it hits the bore, and it closes back up tight. Then, as I showed you before, the hammer comes back, and it's fitted up in the bolt, and it hits the firing pin, and that sets the round off. And so now you have an empty casing, and the projectile goes down the barrel and goes up into that tube I told you about and catches the piston that once again is attached to this, and it drives it back, and this extends out, and as it comes out of the barrel and catches the point where there's nothing holding the round, it flings it out into the dirt because you don't need it anymore. And then the whole cycle repeats. Then there's another round up here, comes it forward, slams it, goes off, comes back, flings it, and it just goes back and forth. And the impressive thing is that all this happens in a fraction of a second, much faster than your eye could pick up. Next, I'm going to teach you SPORT. SPORT is an acronym that stands for slap, pull, observe, release, trigger, shoot. And this is taught to all soldiers, and it teaches you how to fire the weapon in a combat situation. So, first step is slap. So what this means is you seat the magazine and then you slap it to make sure that it's in place, because sometimes when these things have shot for a while, they get hot, they get muddy, they gunk up. You kind of got to hit it around a little bit to get it to work right. So you slap. Second is P, pull. You're going to pull back on the charging arm. And then O is observe. This is when you look down in the chamber to inspect it and make sure there's nothing in there already. Then you release. And as I said before, don't ever ride it down, just release it, let the spring do its thing. Then there's T, because you don't ever put your finger on the trigger until you're ready to fire. So tree is trigger, and that means you drop it down, and then S is shoot. So to do that again, it's slap, pull, observe, release, trigger, shoot. As the last part of this documentary, I'm going to fire the AR-15, and since I'm not 18 yet, I have supervising me my grandfather, who was in the Marines, and my dad, who was in the Sheriff's Department for many years. There are 3 main positions that you can fire from. One is standing. With standing, you're going to put your dominant foot firmly behind you and your non-dominant foot out in front. And you're going to grip the rifle and put your left hand about midway up the foregrip and snugly place the butt in your shoulder. For extra stability, you can also wrap your arm in the sling and bring it in even tighter. So this is standing. The second position is kneeling. So you'll get on your right tiptoe and you'll set actually on your heel with your butt. You'll put your left leg out in front of you, you'll put your left elbow right behind your knee, and then put your arm on the bottom of the weapon, and this is crouching. The last one is prone. Prone is the most stable of all the positions. With prone, you align your body up 30 degrees from the weapon so that the recoil won't go straight down your spine. You'll angle your foot up, and you'll use your elbow for stability. And those are the 3 firing positions. This here is Mike. Mike is our stand-in for targets. And there down there is that handsome guy I just introduced you to. That's Mike. The first thing to know about this is that it's semi-automatic. This means that it's not fully automatic. Every time you want it to shoot, you have to pull the trigger again. But it's capable of a very high rate of fire. And in sake of not wasting ammunition, I've actually loaded 5 rounds into this magazine to demonstrate this. So, remembering sport is slap, pull, observe, release, tap, trigger, and shoot. So, like I said, capable of a high rate of fire, but at Mike's range, not a terribly good idea. You'll be lucky to hit him. So, now that we've had our fun, I'm actually going to try to hit Mike. And this is going to be done with a slower, more practical rate of fire. Oh, something I forgot to mention earlier. When a magazine runs out, the bolt actually jams back and stays. Which means the next time, instead of racking it and all that mess, all you have to do is press this button right here, and the bolt comes forward. And since I'm not done talking, I put it on safety. And then as usual, you're going to want to tap it just to make sure it closes. And the safety, by the way, is right here. This is called the selector switch. If this was a military version, it would actually have a third setting called auto. So, that's a more accurate rate of fire. Next, I'm going to show you something called controlled pairs. This is, since the 5.56 is not a terribly large round, if you want to absolutely make sure your enemy goes down, you do a quick pair. So this is a just one right after the other, 2 fire. So, I'm going to demonstrate this now. So, that was controlled pairs. Alright, so what just happened there was the magazine was not out. It actually misfired. And what it means to misfire is that the primer strikes, gets stricken by the pin, but it doesn't detonate. When this happens, don't ever instantly pull it out, because sometimes it's a delayed reaction. Instead, what you do is what I did. You let it cook for a little bit. Then you can try to pull it out. It was a little difficult, so I went ahead and turned the camera off, but I did pop it out, and I looked at it, and it just wasn't a hard enough prime strike. So I actually loaded the round back into it, and we're going to try it again. And if it doesn't work this time, I'll just have to get rid of it. Alright. Now we're going to try this again. As one more final testament to this awesome weapon system, I'm going to demonstrate how it has zero recoil by putting it against my forehead and pulling the trigger. So, let's see how this works. So, if I can do that, anybody can shoot it. No recoil. You can do it one hand any way you need to. Alright, this is Mike after he got nailed by the AR, so it's definitely not the most accurate weapon, but at 100 yards it doesn't matter. You'll hit them somewhere. And if you miss them, it's a semi-automatic, so you can just put as many as you need down.